So comfortable.
Okay.
Hi, this is Janet Fitch, and if it is noon on Wednesday, it is Writing Wednesday. And today I have Andrew Nicholls, a well-known comedy writer and available subject, and he's lying around the house, who has a new book out called Comedy Writer about what he knows about comedy, as opposed to his other book, Valuable
What I don't know about women.
Valuable Lessons, which
book.
is about his life in comedy. Andrew's been been a comedy writer for some 4 decades. He started when he was 12, so it makes sense. And I welcome to Writing Wednesday.
Thank you, my honey. That's something you haven't heard on Writing Wednesday before.
No, I never have.
I hope.
So we're lucky to have a little bit of insight and a master writer right on the premises. So that is a good thing. Andrew and his writing partner Daryl Vickers were the head writers of the Johnny Carson show, The Tonight Show, for its last 6 years. So behind me, I have one of their more to come station break things that Andrew has around the house. And what is the story of this weasel?
We wanted to do a piece. I wanted to satirize the People's Choice Awards one year on the show. So 89, 88 or 89, I think. And so we mounted the Sniveling Weasel's Choice Awards. So it was the movies, it came out just before the Oscars, I think. So it was a sketch, it was like a 10-minute sketch, done in black tie and tux with spotlights and all the glitz, in which a weasel ran down a ramp and picked the Best Picture winner and the Best Actor and Best Actress, I think, and maybe even supporting.
Oh, from
that year.
Dog Food.
From bowls of weasel chow.
Weasel chow. Yeah, I remember seeing
we did have actual weasel chow. It turned out that weasels can't be trained, so if you were to find the sketch on YouTube any day, they are actually ferrets. We had a backup ferret, and the lovely Lenore, who whacked them with her weasel whacker, which was a silver broom. And
gently, she whacked them gently.
And the Tonight Show, there wasn't much rehearsal. There was no rehearsal before the day of the show, and the show went out live at 5:30 from Los Angeles. So we had Tony Danza do Except for Everybody, which was the joke. And everybody got that trophy, and we had 3 of them, I guess. We had a backup, and so I got one of them, and Tony DeSanto, one of the writers, got another, and maybe Johnny took the other. I think he did. I saw it at his place once.
Yeah. All right. Well, I thought we should. This is Writing Wednesday is mostly people who are writing themselves and always struggling with dusting off ideas that have become, we handle a lot of ideas and they become very, we get kind of claustrophobic. It gets to the point where you've had your ideas, you've thought your ideas, you thought your ideas again. You get sick of your ideas, at least I do. And so I've heard you teach from, basically, this is a course that Andrew gave up at UC Davis, and I've heard him lecture on comedy. And it just seemed so full of ideas for any writer to start thinking differently that I thought I had just a bunch of questions from the book that I thought would be very interesting for the writers to get a look at how.
Give me your toughest, most probing
comedic inquiry. Brain works. I think that how do comedy writers think differently than the rest of us?
Well, there's a common component with all writers, which is eschewing cliche, the shop-worn, the trite, the ready to hand. And the main stuff, as I put here in the handily pointed out first page, is developing habits of mind that lead to thinking slightly askew, both more observantly, obviously, although along a slightly different axis than a short story writer, where you're trying to observe specifics that others will recognize immediately. but it's in the recognition of things which are just a little off to one side, perhaps, but should also be, unless you're writing flat-out absurdity, should also be roughly recognizable, comprehensible human traits. But they tend to be, of course, with comedy, particularly American and particularly British comedy, much more pessimistic. I say at one point in the book that if you walk through a small mountain gift shop and look at the mottos written on the river stones, you'll see things like hope and aspire and love and patience. You want the opposite of that. You want a mildly grudging pessimism, a tinted eyebrow. You want to be looking for, well, what am I being lied to about this? What is too simple here? To really be remilled as a thought, as an original thought. What can I see from a slightly different angle, which people will still recognize?
So comedy is the opposite of sentimentality.
Very often, in fact, parody very often is parody, especially nowadays. Parody of commercials, television, movies tends to be on SNL. Parody of a sentiment of some sort, which is taken too much at face value.
Which is interesting because, you know, what we've talked about on Writing Wednesday and I talk about with my students is that sentimentality is the working off on yourself of emotion that you haven't really got. And so what comedy does is sort of call you to account.
Yeah, I say in the book, I think that kitsch is the proclamation of personal feelings. It's saying, look how much I'm feeling, as opposed to making others feel the same thing, which would be the art of it. It's the Thomas Kincaid, the car wash greeting card sentiment is the sort of thing you want to be aware of, because you've got to fill your head with all that stuff that everyone's going to recognize, but also try to. Bill Hicks, the comic, said that the comedian is the person who says, "Wait a minute," as the consensus is forming. So be aware of the consensus, and then just spend a little while thinking about what aren't they thinking of here?
Well, I just love, I because I live with you, I get to see this firsthand. You often, when people make mistakes, we usually just elide the mistake. It's like, oh, that was, no, that wasn't it. It really said blah, 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 or you're really supposed to make a left turn, or you're really supposed to, and we just move on. And you don't do that at all.
You have to do it when driving, for instance, or during surgery, or washing the dishes. But habit is how we ingrain, is really the useful into behavior. And you get too used to the useful because that's the shop worn, the trite. That's the floor model. And if you can work your way into seeing around that and thinking, well, what would X think of this? What would a squirrel think of this? What would the Google Map car think if it was going by? Getting outside of normal thought does not help you in most cases in life. It won't help you at the office in particular. But if you manage to train yourself to think slightly askew, to look at error. I have, as you know, a slight face blindness, and I have certain agnosias that you're...
Yeah, Andrew cannot tell the difference. I have a number of friends and
blind friends
and relatives, women of a certain age with blonde hair, slightly gray, and boy, Andrew has real.
So at parties,
so if he missed you at a party,
do I know her? Yeah. And so those errors...
But you once actually went up to your brother at a party.
I talked to my own brother for 2 minutes at a party once. I hadn't seen him in a year, but he dyed his hair and got a mustache, I think, and I had no idea. It was like watching the end of a movie where you go, was that the murderer? Who was that? Who? I don't get it.
And this is helpful in writing comedy.
If you can lasso that enough, every now and then you'll get a little chunk of gold in the bottom of the pan. Not always, but if you can grasp your misunderstandings. Daryl and I, my partner, had a pitch at MTV once, which went pretty well for a while. You're falling out of frame here, sweetie.
Always.
You're my host.
Yeah. Okay.
Based on a misreading, Daryl's daughter had her homework flashcards upside down on the carpet when I walked into his home office. And one of them I thought said upside down, "Ask Megadeth." And I said, that's like the world's worst advice show. normally your brain would take that and go, what am I thinking? What does it really say? Daryl said, no, that's the show. Why don't we pitch MTV on a show in which we ask the people who've actually made the mistakes, not Ann Landers, not Dear Abby, not Ask Amy, the people who've made the worst mistakes possible. Megadeth wasn't up for it, but we got Iggy Pop. And then, it was going to be Ask Iggy. So the transmutation from misreading.
Yeah, the misreadings. Yeah. You really, Andrew sees makes the most wonderful mistakes, and recognizes it as like a crack in the door that you can
it's open. Your mind telling you something.
You can open it further instead of bypassing. All of us make mistakes, but that's a way to really kind of loosen up as a writer, is to start noticing the little mistakes that you make.
Which, as your hearing and your eyesight goes, they're a daily occurrence, and they're not all going to be fruitful. If I had read this as Ask, Pomegranate, it wouldn't have necessarily meant anything. I had a... this is what you were laughing at.
This is in
Go ahead,
in Andrew's
you read it, because I'll get the laugh.
We disregard or correct 1,000 small mistakes a day. That can't be what the sign says. No, wrong charger, that's for the toothbrush. And most of us, just move past that. A girl who seriously thought Eagle's life in the fast lane was, I'll bring the Vaseline.
That was tough, letting her down on that.
That's right. Yeah. Neil Gaiman mistakenly typed Coraline one day instead of Caroline and found a title character. So accidental amusement. I talk about always carrying that little notebook with you. Write down. Start, it livens a different part of the brain. You were saying in the book that a different part of your brain lights up when a professional comedy writer is given one of those brain scans.
Yeah.
A different part of the brain lights up.
The left frontoparietal area. Yeah. I say if you're looking down on top of your head, and if your head was a dartboard, it would be the 12. So that would be around here. And actually, giving the same prompts to non-writers doesn't light up the same area. That is non-long-term writers. So there's something that someone who has done it successfully, some muscle that they're...
But I want to posit that all of us can use like a little bit more of our brains by these... A comedy writer, what they do, we can do a little of that too. As I've noticed, then you start to notice, I missaw that. Today my brother is in a lockdown situation, and I took him to do his banking and stuff because it's kind of safer than a taxi. And he went to a bank, ready teller outside, and there was a guy next to him that had a mask and then a beard, like a white beard. Or it looked like he had a beard. And my brother came back in the car, and I said, that guy, he had the mask and the beard, and it looked like a toilet paper dispenser, And actually, when we drove by him, he didn't have a beard.
He just had a toilet paper dispenser. Yeah.
But it looked like that for a second, and I could see, what you're talking about. It's just like, instead of just allowing this to remain in the unconscious, I see something and I just elide it. To stop and take a note. That's funny, and that it was.
And then
funny.
When the mistaken mind kicks out, let the logical mind kick in and consider what this is. Is it a visual joke? Could this be sold to a cartoonist? Can it be changed? You don't have to use the same guy you saw. You can manufacture a different kind of person.
Way. And as fiction writers say, that many of us are. That would be something a character can notice and have an aside, For a character to have a bit of a sense of humor is really quite delightful. There's one thing that Andrew, there's many things that Andrew he's wound for this. This is a friend of ours, Steve DeGroot. I don't know, he's writing right now, so Steve might even be on this call. But he made this for Andrew's birthday. And it's his version of what Andrew's brain looks like. It's like this machine for making funny things. So he, there's what we do, which is we can learn from this, but I think on some level this is definitely part of the structure of your brain.
As with the scale in Steve's thing there, you become aware of it, but then you also have to weigh it and decide if it's useful or not. It's not always useful.
But there's Andrew. There are many things that he just was unaware of. That he didn't know. Can I say this? Is this okay? It's in it. It's in the book.
So.
It's in the book.
Out now.
This one is in the book that he didn't realize that fruit came from flowers. Like we have a little orange tree on the balcony, and
I thought it was the leaf and the flower, and the fruit was somewhere else, like down the stem. Yeah.
And then we could see it. It's astonishing what you don't know, even at a fairly advanced age.
You mean what I don't know?
Well, all of us have this, and it kind of freshens the mind. It's like a rain shower or something. It cleans your mind when you realize you're still capable of surprising yourself or being surprised by the world. I think it's a cleansing thing. But I love I mentally confuse writers Edith Wharton and Eudora Welty is very language oriented. So the initials screw it up for him. Marshall McLuhan and Marshall Dillon. And this is my favorite. Ron Paul, Rand Paul, Rue Paul, and Paul Ryan.
And Paul the little mountain goat.
Yes, So to notice, like you always get this, you used to get this lyric of a song wrong, like I'll bring the Vaseline. That's funny, and it's your mistakes. It kind of washes the dust away.
And sometimes you have to frame it a little. Yeah, funny, I mean, just to say that poor girl's Eagles mishearing is funny by itself, but sometimes you weigh it and go, okay, like this is a line to give a character. Does it make a picture? Is it a cartoon joke? Is it a stand-up joke? Can I make fun of a person who might think this? If I've heard it slightly differently, is there a way of making it funnier? So you do still put it in the rock polisher.
Oh, because as a comedy writer, you're always looking for where can I sell it?
Well,
where can I
sell, meaning in this case, because the examples I gave, you're not necessarily going to make any money from it, but it's making it a joke, making it useful, a misunderstanding. There's the one I quote in the book, which is Yogi Berra's great line where he said, some reporters asked him what he thought of the hotel he was staying in, and he said, oh, it was great. The hotels were so fluffy I could hardly close my suitcase. I'm sure if he said that, or if it was written for him by one of the people who traveled for him, it's based on an observation of someone just looked at the towel and thought, yeah, I could steal that, and then thought, yeah, it'd probably get hard to close the suitcase. So that's just a normal thing to realize that you're thinking of stealing something. Right. And then to take that slightly sideways and say, well, that's Yogi. He tends to be self-indicting. He will say things that he supposes that he doesn't realize are admitting to something, and you just work it around. You shape it, shape the bowl.
Well, I taught a class in writing the sentence, as you well know, because that's what I was doing for a whole weekend, and how we took a long, complicated sentence from William Styron. And we tried to say it just in basic language, and you lost 90% of it, 95% of it. It was a subtle thing. And it's like if that joke had been told wrong.
Right. The wrong way to tell it is, how did you like your hotel, Yogi? It was great. I stole some towels. You're also then leaving out the audience's participation, which is the opportunity to put that last little Lego block into place and go, oh, he doesn't realize he just let it slip.
It was so fluffy, I couldn't close my suitcase.
A parallel example would be the woman who calls her husband in the car and says, I hope you're being careful on the freeway. There's some maniac driving in the wrong direction. And the husband says, one, there's hundreds of them. So the straightforward is, I hope you're being careful. There's someone driving on the wrong way on the freeway.
And
he says,
husband,
that's me.
That's me, yeah, right.
It's the same event and the exact same reveal, but it's the unawareness of the speaker. Right. In Yogi's case, sort of not really unaware.
Well, unawareness of the speaker, that's... So comedy often is you have to have a character. a certain kind of character who would have that observation.
The stalking horse, yeah.
I know one of the things in your book talks about the character palette, and I do talk about that from time to time on Writing Wednesdays about character orchestration. How do you make a scene so that your protagonist can stand up to the antagonist, that they're not crushed by them? They have to be able to go back and forth, but usually antagonists look stronger because they don't have the indecision that a protagonist has. But there's in this book, there's quite a developed exercise of how to create a character palette. Can you talk a little bit of that?
That's and in the book that it's called I call it Invite 10 People to a Party, and it's for the longer lasting material, something that you to create something that's going to work for you for a television series
or a novel
or for something like a novel or a series of novels, or if you look at the Thin Man movies, Nick and Nora Charles are equally weighted. You don't have one witty guy and the poor wife who's taking the insults. He's witty and drunk, she's witty and drunk, and they're bouncing off each other and insulting each other perfectly. You have that thing. So no one's going to get, and I have in the past, I don't remember if I mentioned in the book, have had to actually let an actress go at the table reading of a pilot, a TV pilot, because as great as she was, when we put her and the actor in the same scene, we didn't have both colors there. She was too something. We couldn't put her fingers on it.
It was like being in that James Bond one where James Bond is in the train with the blue is the warmest. Ava Green, the blue is the warmest color woman, who's a great actress, but there was like zero chemistry, and this was supposed to be the love affair of the movie, and it was just like they were looking at each other like they were a mop and a broom. It was just like character. There was no.
It was t-ball instead of racquetball. It was just whack.
Yeah, it was horrible. Anyway,
the 10 character thing.
Tell us okay, so this is an exercise called 10 characters at a party. And you're adding one character at a time. So tell us how this one works.
You start off, I did this with my class at UC Davis. You start off with one person at a party, who's the host. And you give them a gender and approximate age, and you don't have to mention what kind of party it is. And then you say, okay, add someone else, change them up a little. So the class or your own head will suggest, we've got a guy, so a woman enters. And he's middle-aged, so she's young. And okay, why? She's early though, right? Why is she early? And so you gradually, with a series of prompts or your own prompts that you've gotten used to because you know your writing strengths, you add then a third person. Oh, this person is a little upset. Why? Does the upsetness rub off? Are they a little crazy? Does this upset make sense? Is it raining outside? Are they late? Did they just have something bad happen, fail an exam? Okay, then the fourth person. Now,
do you have to think about how they're related to the first two?
Usually because they're interreacting in some way. Like the fourth person, I think, says, the third person promised to provide the entertainment. Okay, well, what do? Do they play the banjo? Are they going to do impressions? So in each case, you're adding some little aspect of something that will be able to pay off later in the series or later in the pilot. And then when I get to about 8 people, I say, oh, the network says you're going to cut 2 people. So now you look at who you've got. You don't normally have a series with 10 main characters. And you go, okay, we don't really need the juggler, and we don't really need the 6-year-old with a lollipop. Okay, lose those. And then I took the characters to a nightclub where a fight breaks out and just say, okay, well, did you cut anybody you needed? Do you still have the palette you need? The palette is what you need to take into the woods when you're going to be painting the sunset through the trees. You don't want to have to go back to the house for more paint. When you're in the middle of a series and you need someone to be silly, someone to say something that everybody knows, someone for them to be smarter than, someone to be needlessly provocative, someone to be sexually attractive. You need your palette. You need everybody in there. And you have to set that in a novel, I would think. Although I'm sure if you're developing it the way you write anyway, it can accrete as you go. You don't prefigure everything.
What you do is you tend in a novel, what I don't know about you guys, but me, I tend to create more characters than I need. I'm like just the character creating machine. And so I'll create people that I don't need, and then I'll have to go back and cut them. Often I'll create multiples. I might have created multiples of the same type of character, which you wouldn't do because you're looking at their function in the piece. Whereas I'm just generating.
Which means their function for you as well. One of the reasons we were at a party and someone was complaining about sitcoms with single parents, and one of the things I point out in the book, if you have a limited number of trailers for your actors and budget and everything, having a mother and a father in a family sitcom means that you've got two people who either disagree, which creates conflict you may not need, unless it's married with children, or they're superfluous. They duplicate each other's opinion. I don't want you going to that party tonight with all your crazy friends. I don't want you going either. You don't need a superfluity, a duplication of effort, and so you may as well get rid of one of them, have the other one be a charming widower, and save the money.
Or married to a pilot,
Yeah, so that was one of the reasons actually when the budgets of shows started getting up above over $500,000, $600,000 an episode in the early '90s. That people started saying, maybe we don't need both parents. And it wasn't because they didn't want to see the loving relationship. If they're going to argue, if they're Peg and Ed Bundy, that's great. They're creating conflict. You have dynamics with dialogue. But if you don't see any way to have these people argue without people going, well, that's tough on the kids or whatever, then...
Yeah, which is interesting because classic fairy tales never have two parents, or rarely. The old people who, the husband catches the fish, the magic fish, that kind of thing.
I could only think of one where the parent, where a family figure is even actively involved with the children on an adventure, and that's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, written by Ian Fleming.
You need to get rid of the mother, or there's nothing's going to happen if there's a mom there. They always kill the mom. The dad remarries somebody who he thinks is nice, who's really a bad person, who is, I guess, in the psychology of fairy tales, is also the mother, the evil stepmother. When you can't say the mother is bad, it's just like, okay, we kill the mother, and then there's this evil step person who comes in when you're in junior high. And somehow leaves when you're like in your 30s. If you're lucky.
And this is one of the reasons for the annoying best friend in sitcoms as well. You have someone persuasive enough to drag the character away from where they're safe. And if the person was to leave themselves and go to the place that's unsafe, suddenly you don't trust them. You go, why would you go to the rave? You're 16. Whereas if the annoying idiot best friend talks you into going, it's kind of funny, and then the parents can chime in later. But you don't have both parents there when Mary Poppins is there. You need Mary to take them. You don't have both parents telling Alice not to go down the rabbit hole. She has to get away from them.
Right. Well, there's also, there's a lot of and then you talk about a lock.
Oh, we've written all over this. Now I can't resell it. Yeah. Does this come out?
About a lock. We never think about that. In fiction, we always say, what's at stake? What's at stake? What's at stake? But when you think about what a lock really makes it more clear than that.
I hate finding myself yelling at the screen, saying, what are you doing? The vampire's on the beach. Don't go to the beach. The lock in a situation is the reason that intelligent, well-meaning, informed characters act contrary to their best interests to create, in my case, usually comedy, but also drama, suspense, to create a story. And the lock in the 60s and 70s was normally happy family, and then it became they were on an island together and couldn't get off, or he can't tell anyone that his housemate is a genie, or you can't kick the hillbillies out because they're worth $1 million and your bank would collapse. So you need a reason that well-meaning, intelligent people don't just end the story, don't just do what you, the reader, would probably do, or the viewer, and say, that's ridiculous. I wouldn't sit on that park bench with that crazy person nattering away. I'd catch the next bus. He goes, well, what's the lock? He has to take the next bus or he'll be late. Or he's British in the case of Interesting Facts, the John Cleese Peter Cook sketch, and he's just impoliteness is not possible. You can't just get up and walk away from someone. So you have to lock people.
British humor doesn't really need a lock. They just have to be British.
You just have the discomfort of being yourself. Yeah, which holds for Canadians too, a little ways.
So this is interesting. This is an exercise from comedy writer by Andrew Nicholls that we're looking at today. And it's an exercise about locks. So it's like take try a situation with two people and find a reason they can't leave each other. And then you add people. Try it with 4 people. Try it with 6 people. None of them can leave. No desert islands, no lost. You have to really, and you see that in plays too, where people are having trouble. They can't leave. There's a reason.
And sometimes it's not leaving. Sometimes it's a reason why they can't avoid doing a thing.
Yeah.
A person has to
sell the cherry orchard.
Yeah, that's perfect. Or has to invite the person they don't like, or has to put up with at dinner the annoying is it the boss? That's easy. You don't want to get fired. But
the rich uncle, or aunt. We've seen that a lot.
Because you're locking them in your frame. In TV and film, it's a literal frame, but the frame of your book, you don't want people getting to the middle and going, I don't know, there's something about this I just don't believe. It's because the main character would leave. Nobody would put up with this. Right. If you people, and I've seen questions online recently about how do I torture my characters. Well, part of it isn't what you do to them in the moment. It's part of them is who you make them in the beginning, so they don't save themselves and ruin your story.
So Andrew, obviously, has written he's written monologue, he's written sitcom, he's written sketch comedy, late night, but also short stories and plays. So actually he's got a play that's going to be on Zoom in February that you can see that's going to be staged up at UC Davis. So there's linguistic, because you've done a lot of joke writing. How many jokes do you think you've written in your life?
We did one radio show once for 6 months or 8 months in 1980. Call to our show. No. So 6,800 jokes in 1 8-month period, and Daryl and I have been running together for 50 years, as you say, since we were 12. So, tens or hundreds of thousands. In the first 12 weeks on the Tonight Show, we wrote 998 pages.
Pages of jokes.
Well, that was mostly sketches. The first year we didn't write monologue, and we started about almost a year in.
So a lot of jokes. So we've been talking about story elements and character and locks, but then jokes themselves are like a really, really just seeing if you can make a joke, create a joke. Like Andrew thinks, I always thought I was funny. I come from a funny family, but Andrew says you're situationally funny. It's like if it comes up, then it comes up. But to sit down and look at a page and come up with 100 jokes, that I couldn't do that. But it's a good exercise. It's exercising a different part of the brain, which is always good. In case you have brain damage, you can rely on another part of the brain.
You have to hope that it's that kind of brain damage.
Anything that kind of gives your brain a rain shower. And some of the exercises in this are just really, really fun. There's one with numbers.
That was an actual job.
You pick up a joke. Like the number that illustrated here is the number 2.6. Now, what can you say about a number?
Well, this was from a wine seminar for Shadow Gay Wines that Daryl and I had to write a joke for every number in a chart of the wine sales in millions of liters for 12 brands across Canada. And this was a 3-hour session. So the first number was 3.1. And so this little annoying animated character said, 3.1, isn't that the beginning of pie? And speaking of pie, when's dessert, fatso? So we got going. And then we looked at this, and it was just rows of numbers. And we went cross-eyed for days writing this. So for the book, I took the number 2.6 and wrote, I think, 40 jokes for the number 2.6.
But it was wonderful. It's like 2.6, most of us are not number people, or we wouldn't be writers. But to say, what can you say about 2.6? 2.6 is the alcohol content of lousy beer. It's the number of worms I don't want to find in my apple. It's dog voting age. So maybe take a handful of numbers and see if you can just make a list of things that number might be.
The number is
very
fruitful,
fun
because it's not about the number at all. It's not about 2 or about 6 or about what you do with the numbers. There's no reference in there to math. It's just that it's something banal which you can go sideways, like a genealogy chart, and see what all the cousins and nephews of that number are. It's the number of degrees. It's how many degrees warmer it is in the pool next to where Eric is standing. You're insulting other people and doing other things. It's a number 2 pencil with an erection.
So here's another, like, these are all like linguistic. There's a lot of just wordplay that behooves any writer to try. An exercise of where you take a sentence, this is my stepladder. And then you use the prefix, incorporate a picture and a common prefix that has a couple of different messages. So this is my stepladder. I never knew my real ladder.
That's that's a really good internet meme.
That is really a very good one. That's a good exercise. There is, imagine you're briefing an alien who needs to know everything we take for granted about a subject. So men, like a waitress job, menus, kids eat, wait time, tips, free water, diners messes, wine, and you make a whole list of things. And it just seems like that would just kind of clean the palate.
It makes you think not only about the subject, it makes you think about yourself. And when you've written them all down, I call this the beat list. It's really useful for poetry and songs, but also for a sketch, or for any single scene in which you're going to, where you want something to happen. If you say waitress, restaurant, everybody jumps to tables, free glass of water, waitress, you get your food, you pay, you go. But there's 20, 30, 40 other things which, if you're explaining to someone who's never been there, you would realize that sometimes the waitress doodles a little heart next to the price, and
you tip really well.
Or am extorted to do so.
And then sometimes you can do 2 different aspects of a character. Like you give an example, waitress for the prosecution. So tell me about how that works.
I misread something. I was looking at
misreading.
I was looking at a TV guide listing witness for the prosecution. I read waitress for the prosecution. I said, that's a movie. It's either a movie or it's a monologue, if you had been a waitress, or it's a sketch, maybe an SNL type sketch. But for this, you would make 2 beat lists. Either you do it instantly, automatically in your head, if you've been doing it a long time, or you just write down everything you associate with a restaurant and waitress's duties and annoyances in particular. And then all the legal phrases from all the movies you've watched set in courtrooms. You can't handle the truth, and please enter as Exhibit A, and I'll clear this courtroom, and all that stuff. And then you just match them up, and you get the stuff like, just answer the question, have you seen this pancake before? Or where were you on the 16th at 8 o'clock relative to the Johnsons' party of 4? And the cross-typing creates that little bit of asymmetry that loosens up. It starts to pan-fry your idea. It puts thinky sauce on your brain carrots, as I said there.
Well, let's take a look at some of the questions that we've gotten for you guys. Oh, there's Steve. Look, we've got your the card that you made for Andrew. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at some of the questions. I have fallen and I can't get off TV commercial. D thought about Disney stories heavy on male parents and not the mothers. Yeah, mothers.
Even Pocahontas.
Mothers cool, the fun.
Has a father in a tree.
They make sure that
you're up for a part and you're replaced by a tree.
That's character orchestration. Let's see what we've got. Does audience participation make it funnier?
audience participation is a crucial step if you're going to be a career comedy writer. My partner and I started writing for cartoonists, radio. It was only when we started writing for stage, for stand-ups, and actually seeing 200 people reacting at the same time that we began to hone, I think, our sense of what was actually funny, as opposed to what two 18-year-olds cracked each other up with. I think it doesn't make it funnier necessarily, though it shows you how to make it funnier. We sold a lot of plays in our 20s and got to go and see what we thought was funny not work in a lot of cases. And it also, crucially, for writers, gets you away from language, from a complete devotion to language, which those radio jokes, it's just language, and into looking at people and what they can do with their hands, their legs, their feet, pulling things out of their pockets, their obvious concern with their hair, their appearance, their glasses. You start looking at props. What I do on a sitcom punch-up is always go to the set now and just walk the floor and look at what have we got, what can you fall back on, all the stuff you need to notice. As I sometimes say, it isn't what you know, it's what you notice. You have to really, really take it in the way you would if you're captioning someone else's cartoon and go, well, what's in the picture? What can I draw people's attention to? It's a dragon, and there's a moat, and there's a girl in the castle. What else? Oh, there's a river. There's stuff you don't notice right away, which may become useful. And it is usually a late developing thing, the observance of the physical and physical possibilities. It was really good for us writing comics for the newspaper before we started writing cartoons.
And that's really helpful for fiction writers, too, when we talk about that you don't set the scene in fiction, you bring the character on and then they interact with the physical environment. And then we know that objects and stuff exist in their world because the character interacts with them. And this is the same, this would, I mean, it's using your environment rather than having it just be a static thing. A character takes the sword off the wall at, the fancy people's house and starts handling it. It's more interesting than just having it be there. Dee says, when I was a kid, I was in the hospital and heard them say they were giving me antibiotics only, and I heard they were giving me bionics. So I thought I was going to be like Jamie Summers. See, that's awesome. And that could, in fiction, you could work that theme. You could work that, it becomes a motif.
You'd use that for an Amelia Bedelia type character who has fruitful misunderstandings.
Or even maybe even not such a comic character, but just somebody who you just lay it in there and it becomes part of their own private world, their own conversation with themselves. Let's see. Kiss the guy, kiss the sky. Yeah, I know that one. I used to have where the deer and the cantaloupe play. Yeah. It's funny. It becomes part of a unique interior world. So Linda was saying the notebook carrying writing situation makes me feel like a dork when I'm doing it. Yeah, if it makes you feel like a dork, I don't know. To me, it just makes me feel like a spy. But then I always wanted to be a spy. So,
there's people enjoying the beautiful
people
art.
are enjoying the art.
To the exclusion of
it's better than the kitchen.
The humans.
Yeah. All right, let's. There's some joke setups that are very interesting. That I just think makes you think about the ordinary and how to extend your observation of the ordinary into something that makes your mind spark a little bit more. So say if I wanted to make a joke out of something, first you have to observe, and then you have to have a spin on it. You have to have some kind of a take. It's a two-part operation.
I always take a lot of notes for everything, even for a one-liner. I used to write for Mickey Rooney, and Mickey would call us from the road doing Sugar Babies, and he would tell us the town he was in and maybe what the weather was like there, or hey, Halloween's coming up, and so we would just make that beat list first and research the town if we could. He was in Philadelphia one time, and so I said, okay, cheesesteaks, brotherly love, Liberty Bell. You've got certain things that your mind is already automatically going to go to. A little bit of research, you can find out about the local teams of a place. If it's early in the morning somewhere, well, is there dew on the grass? And in which case that's slippery. And that's more for comic integration. Really inhabit the place you're in and the place you're putting your people. Put everything down, everything. It may be useless. It may be a trivial thought. Who else might walk into the scene or in the background of the scene, which is really useful for animation, or for background sounds or background smells. What kind of vehicle would drive by? What is the waft of that smell? A little harder to depict in animation, but you can do it in a short story.
Yeah, Roberta asks, are there universal props that work with multiple cultures or languages? Andrew's done a lot of TV in a lot of countries. Are there props that you shouldn't use?
Well, that's the thing that tend to stick in my mind is what you shouldn't use. We did a series in Sweden and found out they didn't know what ceiling fans are. And of course, we have the hotter weather, and so we have ceiling fans. And I guess we had just said ceiling fan, and they were translating anyway. And I had to send them a picture from a Hollywood movie. They didn't know what fire hydrants were. Apparently, in Sweden, the fire truck digs under the lawn, and there's a faucet underneath there. They didn't know what pretzels were in Sweden. So you dig a little. We did a series in Barcelona, and so you look up Catalan and you look at the language and how it differs, because that will affect the things people will joke about and pun about. The universality would be, in a family situation, just the home and the relationships between the people. The home, the kitchen has a sink, the sink breaks, plumbers have to come, who has to visit. The annoyance of interruption from work is universal. We did a George Carlin special in 1984, his first HBO special, which he had a lot of material, but no reason to say all these jokes. And we said, Daryl and I said, well, if you're working at home, you're trying to get work done, and everybody keeps interrupting you. And he said, yes, that happens. I said, but instead of phoning, have him come by. And so every comedian friend he had come by, they wanted to borrow something. They wanted his opinion about who was in this slide. Everybody had some reason to interrupt. And so you're poking at your caged character and giving them reasons to snarl.
Something to keep track of, that you don't have to, do this in public. Maybe that's easier. Was the news. Keeping, when we mostly do follow the news, it's the horror show of Twitter, and we're following a story developing is like, are they ever going to do anything about this? But the book is really interesting about using just random news stories in the newspaper. Like, I take the newspaper. I hope people are still taking newspapers that have not only headlines and what's going on in Washington, but really random stuff that's in a regular newspaper. So there was somebody whose job it was, right, on the Carson show.
Mm-hmm. And on other talk shows too, because gag writers tend to be self-educated strays a lot of the time. And they're not necessarily plugged into what's going on in the world. Very often they're not college educated. They started writing because they were good at it or annoying at it at home or in school. And they skip that formal introduction to Western culture stuff that everybody else got. And they don't know that Myanmar used to be Burma, etc. And so there are often people on the staff of a late night show who will clip what we used to call the news of the weird. And sometimes there are actually services that do it for you and just tell you who beat the world record for wearing a beard made of bees, or who ate the most hot dogs, or it's a crime to have chewing gum in your mouth in an elevator in Singapore.
But for us, for people who are mostly fiction writers here, poets, just the act of saving that stuff is energizing, so it's not all focused on three news stories, but looking at these smaller pieces, looking at...
But I sometimes go on Wikipedia and there's a button on the left saying random article, and I'll click it and see how many times I have to click it. I've gone as many as, I think, 50 or 60 before I hit a single headline that I can say something knowledgeable about. And you're going to hit a lot of Azerbaijani soccer players and rivers in Uruguay. But also, there's a little ping that goes off with some of them. You know something about this, and it's not being algorithmically determined in this case. It's not being focused and pointed at you because of the Canon camera you bought a year ago on your Facebook ads. It's completely random, and it shows you the world. It shows you the real world and how little what we're fed with those algorithms actually shows of it. And hitting the random and doing it through a Curious Facts site or any of a number of aggregator sites that pull together silly stories not only tells you, oh, that's a weird thing they eat in Uzbekistan, but also, people do that, or I can see that. It pings away at your mental vibrissae a little bit. It sensitizes you a little to other stuff that the world has.
And then there's this is like more for fiction writers, is adding a single character to any dramatic plot can make it a comedy if the person subverts the things the genre takes seriously. Is that like your Thelma Ritter character, the gum-chewing housekeeper who's, with a cigarette hanging out of her mouth, who comes in and just has her take on the seriousness of what's going on.
Thelma or Selma Diamond, who did it on Night Court and many other shows.
Eve Arden sometimes.
Eve Arden or Rhea Perlman on Cheers was the plangent, dissatisfied observer. And it's a great character to add to any scene dramatically. I haven't tried it so much in short fiction.
And Chandler does it...
Butlers.
Chandler's Marlowe does it internally, has thoughts as the other character is thinking. I mean, speaking, he's doing the Thelma Ritter lines in his mind.
But the unusual character would be like what Mel Brooks would put the Jewish comic into Spaceballs, and so you have a genre that takes itself seriously, the space opera, and you have someone. So why aren't there any crazy short people who are egomaniacs? Because that's the comedy. He did the same thing in Blazing Saddles. If you take a medical drama and you add someone who's insulting and annoying and not at all doctorly, not at all Marcus Welby, then you get you get to put Hugh Laurie in it and have a different type of, in that case, more comedic genre. Yeah, the genre again is habit in a way. It's formulation. And we get used to it, but it is, even in non-comedy, it's nice to sometimes break out of it and have someone walk through, have a handyman walk in who's not handy, a cop who's not a typical cop, just someone who's worried about their kid having a test the next day and is like, I'll get to the dead body in a second, my kid's having a problem with their homework. Things that are going to happen, that do happen, think wider.
I love this. There's an exercise of mnemonics. Mnemonics are like how we remember the order of the planets or the first 10 presidents or something like that. Every good boy deserves favor, that kind of thing. And do new ones. Traditional, the order of the planets. My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, etc. New, with no Pluto. My vape's estimated monthly juice solution units, 19. But that's instead of doing Sudokus or crossword puzzles, you invent your own kind of rain showers for your head to try something goofy like that.
And the kids in my class doing this and similar exercises, I would ask them a minute in, how does it feel? And they would all say the same thing. It hurts. It has to hurt. That's the gym phrase. That's the pain leaving your body. That's the non-writer leaving your body. It should be a dutiful, decent labor.
It's fun. Here's a fun one. Here's another. The Tree of Life: Kingdom, Phylum, Class, Order, Family, Genera, Species. traditional is King Philip came over for good soup, right? And Andrew's was Kona pot calms our 5 groovalicious senses. If you spent 10 minutes doing that, you sparkle up your head.
And this I picked because I had never heard of anybody doing it. So you're not going to have anything to lean on, and you can't look it up.
Here's another exercise: is the unexpected word in an otherwise predictable sentence. I promise betraying you is the second thing from my mind. Please excuse my husband. He's slightly hard of drinking. I apologize for every bad thing I'm going to say about you. That you could do, that's a sparkly thing to do with your head. Let's see, what else can we ask? What else did you want to know? But this is something I think a lot of writers could benefit just from the exercise of it, the stretch of it.
Yeah, and the stretch of it, exercises you do for your own amusement can turn into short website humor pieces. They can sometimes become Funny or Die or YouTube type videos or comics.
Or Shouts and Murmurs if you're really lucky.
Shouts and Murmurs. There's other sites like that. And there's a lot of comics, weekend comics, daily syndicated comics in the paper who buy jokes.
So the book is Comedy Writer by Andrew Nicholls, and half of it is about craft, and that's what I was paying attention to. And the other half is about markets. So if you're actually interested in writing comedy, there's a lot of good things in there. And the most important thing that I can see about that was that agents do not get you work in comedy. You get the work, and then the agent makes the deal. So at least in fiction, the agent actually sells the work. So we're lucky that way. So
in fiction, you have something to sell. People seem to expect in comedy that the agent will say, she's really funny, hire her, without any samples. And of course, that's not the case.
Yeah. Any last questions before we take our leave? Hey, Zunaid, nice to see you. Hi. I keep losing Wi-Fi. Oh, I'm so glad. No, Vromans doesn't have his book. This is a pure online Amazonian thing because Andrew is really an impatient person. And he just threw it out there. So it's available on Amazon. And you have a play coming out in...
That I'll promote on my Facebook page probably, February 19th and 20th, 2 live performances, actors in 4 states, I think, and the director. The director moved from New York to California to direct, but all being done with the OBS theater system, which those of you in theater probably have already encountered. But the way of stitching together performances from people's own homes against a green screen and with a numbered floor grid to make them look like they're in the same place.
Yeah, so we can actually see that without flying up to Sacramento or Davis. Mm-hmm. So, the upside of the downside of the pandemic is that we can see things from a long way away. So, do we guys eat breakfast together? No, Andrew gets up and late. He needs a lot of sleep. That brain, Steve DeGroot got this, this is Andrew's brain, and it needs a lot of sleep. So he gets up late and immediately starts working. Comedy writers do not have writer's block. They just work like mad. Unbelievable. As I'm still angsting my way towards my computer, Andrew's already put in a full day of work.
No, you work
but we always have dinner together. We have lunch together.
We see each other on weekends.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys, and have a really good day. And we'll see you next week for Writing Wednesday. Bye. Bye.